They just don't get it. They don't get that if you feed a 3-year-old candy all day long, they're just gonna go berserk, like for hours, running up around, blowing things up, the whole bit. And you're gonna go, wait, this gonna stop. And then all of a sudden, they just crash. In this video, I'm gonna compare a 3-year-old on a sugar high with Elizabeth Warren's rant to Jerome Powell on yesterday's Federal Reserve meeting with Congress.
Best of Us Investors presents Carrie Griegmeyer.
What has happened over the last, since 2009? What's the one thing that has happened in our economy that is now probably coming under a lot of question? It's quantitative easing. It's the saving of the banks. It is the influx of money into the system to keep the system liquiditized, or if that's actually a word, liquiditized. And if it is, it's now my word. And we have been on this ride for quite a few years now. COVID hits, pandemic hits, and all of a sudden we just escalate the amount of liquidity that is pumped into the system, dropping lower Fed funds rate to 0.25%, basically zero. Everybody and their brother being able to borrow and buy new homes and refinance their homes and all this stuff. And then inflation takes off, and the Federal Reserve has to make a choice. And that is, what tools do I have, number one, to battle inflation? And number two, how far do we need to go? Because there will be another pandemic, there will be another financial crisis, like the financial housing bust in 07-09. How do we get back to where we have enough dry powder in possession that we can offset? What do? They raise interest rates. So they've raised interest rates 8 times since the beginning of this. And the reason they've raised interest rates 8 times is because they need to get that Fed funds rate up to a point where they can in turn reverse it. Sounds idiotic, but it's their way of creating liquidity in the system. Now, they also have to unload this balance sheet they got that was as high as just over $9 trillion, and they want to do it fast. And instead of doing it over, 14 years or so, they do it probably in 3 to 5, which means you're going to have some consequences. And Elizabeth Warren went on just a freak out about how by raising rates like the Fed is doing, they're going to cause eventually unemployment to go up 1% or 100 basis points from, 3.6% or so to 4.6% based on the projections the Fed has for as they raise interest rates, which really isn't a bad unemployment number, but it means, according to Elizabeth, Miss Elizabeth, Senator Elizabeth, whatever her tag is, it's going to cost 2 million people their jobs. Okay, 2 million people. Now, that's very unfortunate that is going to be that way. But we've been eating cake for like 13, 14 years. We've been eating cake, right? Eventually, when the cake is taken away, you're going to crash. That sugar high is just going to crash, just like a 3-year-old does. And those who have kids and know that they've pumped them up on Twix and gummy bears and sugary stuff, know that eventually they crash. Well, it's the same thing that's happening with us. We are crashing. We're coming off the sugar high and we're crashing. And the reason we're crashing is because if we continue at this rate, just like a 3-year-old, you continue to feed them sugar, eventually they're going to have a freaking heart attack. And then you have dead people. Well, we're having a situation where we're basically have been sugar high in the global, the U.S. economy, along with, the global economy. And if we don't stop raising these rates, we're gonna blow up. We're gonna crash, and that's inflation. As Chairman Powell said in the Q&A with Elizabeth Warren, which I'll leave a link to that video on YouTube, he said, if we don't do this, then you're looking at 5, 6, 7 and higher inflation rate, which is eventually going to kill everybody. I mean, think about it. The other day, yesterday, I was leaving my wife's art studio, and there was an artist who's next door to us, and I run into her and we're talking, and she goes, yeah, today is my last day at so-and-so place. I was like, oh, wow, okay. She goes, I just can't work 3 jobs. So I dropped the lowest paying job, and I got a couple more hours on the highest paying job, and now I can focus on my art career and grow my art career and make money, and all just doing the math, I'm going to offset. So my question is, if she quits her job and she's working 3 jobs, she has 3 income sources, and her husband has 3 income sources, eventually you can't have enough hours in the day, and eventually you got to quit that, because mentally and physically it's going to kill you. And so is this unemployment jump that Elizabeth Warren is saying is going to happen have anything to do with maybe people go from 3 jobs to 2, and they're now able to focus more on the job that's actually paying a little bit more, and maybe they will make more money? Maybe that's how it'll work out. Now, I know the unemployment numbers probably aren't calculated in when this artist person that I know drops one of their jobs, but you have to ask. The reason unemployment is so low is because inflation is so high. If you've been to the grocery store recently, and if you're middle America, you're making maybe a household income of $60K, and most people aren't, then the grocery store is really expensive, and gas to get there is real expensive. And you're seeing that now in consumer loans, credit cards, car loans, all that. And you'll see the chart here. It has exploded. The savings rate as well has declined. So they're going in opposite directions, which creates a weaker economy. The thing about politicians, in my opinion, is that they're out to do one thing, and that's get reelected. To raise money, get reelected, and get the support of their voters. And in a lot of cases, politicians have voters that are living below the poverty level. And so to get their votes, they need to give them something. And recently, in the last, number of years, especially COVID with the mailbox checks, they all got something. Well, now they're not getting anything. But unfortunately, there's repercussions of this. And in my opinion, at some point, you have to withdraw the sugar from the kid. And you have to let him settle out. And he's going to crash, and he's going to end up sleeping for 24 hours. If you're a parent, you've experienced this, where they just sleep all day because they've sugared them up for so long. Well, that's what our economy has been based on. Your increase in your 401k, your IRAs, or your investment accounts has been all to do with leverage. It's all been to do with the massive liquidity that has been pumped into this system. And now it's being retracted through rising interest rates, through the selling off of the Fed's balance sheet, through, in my opinion, the selling of call options against some of the bigger indexes by the Fed. I can explain that later in another video, but it's a way of them sucking dollars out of the system. And our politicians have to realize they're also at fault. It is also them. They are part of the cause of this problem. And if we do not do anything about it soon, and we don't take our lumps right now, we're going to have a bigger problem in the end. And I mean a real big problem. Like, you can't afford to go to the grocery store. You can't not have 3 jobs. You cannot not make more money.